you are now witnessing is not a science fiction movie. This is a centrifuge machine located at a secret training base for Russian astronauts, somewhere behind the Iron Curtain. A machine such as this prepared Major Yuri Gagarin for his epic journey into space. This is the first complete story of both the American and Russian astronauts. Project Man in Space. This program, presented by Tidewater, the Flying A company. Tidewater, with the world's most advanced refineries, where men and science and towers of steel bring you better motoring. This is Tidewater, the Flying A company. I'm Mike Wallace. Our story is the most extraordinary adventure in the history of mankind. Project Man in Space. You are about to see the spectacular drama of America's space effort and exclusive Soviet films of the Russian astronauts, never before seen in this country by anyone outside the intelligence services. Some of the scenes you will witness may appear to border on fantasy, but space itself is fantastic, more incredible than anything the mind of man can envision. It is a vast emptiness, where all the laws of nature as we know them here on Earth dissolve into a massive contradiction, where everything that goes up doesn't come down, where the shortest distance between 2 points is not a straight line, where there is no beginning and no end. It is a world of the impossible, where everything is possible. Space is a place full of cold and loneliness, and flashing meteors and deadly radiation and mysterious cosmic forces. And yet a number of sane, intelligent human beings are ready and willing to plunge boldly into space and face these awesome dangers. These are the men you will meet in Project Man in Space. Men who want to do more than just observe the world around them. They want to find new worlds, new forms of life, and broaden the horizons of man's knowledge and understanding. But this journey of 1,000,000 miles must begin with a single step. That first step was taken on December 17, 1903 at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, when Wolper and Orville Wright made the first powered flight in history. The journey had begun. Inspired by this achievement, many dauntless pioneers were quick to join the battle against the law of gravity. Only a half-century later, aviation has produced the world's most advanced aircraft, the X-15, an experimental space rocket plane. The X-15 is carried aloft under the wing of its mothership, a giant B-52 jet bomber, which will release it into flight under its own power. The X-15 is designed to fly over 4,000 miles an hour and to reach altitudes of over 100 miles. You are witnessing the first powered flight of the X-15. hearing the voice of test pilot Scott Crossfield as he readies himself to be launched from beneath the wing of the mother ship.
Send it go over 3,600. No flat. 510 on the tank. Fuse coming on now. I'm moving first.
Launch light on, master army coming.
Roger. Bring 2 on now.
30 seconds, getting ready to launch light.
Get a launch light on. I'm ready when you are, buddy.
Okay, Scott, let's give it a try.
Okay, here we go with the countdown.
3, 2, 1, release. Real slow to pick up hydraulic pressure. Got 8 of them going.
Roger.
Heading uphill at 33,000 feet.
Roger.
Looks good across the board. And I'm on number 1 and climbing 235. Looks pretty good here. One up on 50. Level. Okay, good check. I dropped bracket lock number. Run out.
So far, the test flight has been a success. But now, the X-15 becomes a powerless glider. Its fuel is gone, its engines are turned off. Only the wind, the wings, and the skill of pilot Crossfield can safely land the ship.
Good deal, buddy. Take it easy. Okay, we'll like clear the edge of the lake here.
Gear is coming down, and it looks good. Easy, Daddy.
Very powerful rudders on this little lady.
The designers of the X-15 had originally hoped that this would be the first vehicle to take man to the edge of space. But on October 4th, 1957, a far more extraordinary vehicle was offered to man, a craft that could carry him well beyond the edge of space. Russia amazed the world with the successful launching of Sputnik 1, the Earth's first artificial satellite. Sputnik 1 carried few scientific instruments, but it did send back important data, which indicated to Russian scientists the possibility that life could survive in outer space. Now the Soviets wanted to know what effects this hostile environment would have upon the human body. They needed an experimental animal to precede man. Dogs were selected because the Russians had achieved remarkable success with them in other experiments. Now, a dog would share in one of the most important scientific adventures that man had yet undertaken. A variety of tests began to select a dog to orbit the Earth inside a satellite. Scientific instruments were surgically attached to the animals to measure their bodily functions. Their nervous reactions and reflexes under stress were carefully studied. Escape mechanisms were designed and tested. Dogs were placed in a centrifuge, a machine which duplicates the unusual forces of gravity. Their reactions were closely examined, and as the day of the launching drew near, the final selection was made. Laika was chosen to go on a journey from which she would never return, because Russian scientists had not yet solved the problem of recovering a satellite from outer space. Laika was to gain an immortality unlike that of any other dog in history. She and her special cabin were placed inside the nose cone of a giant Soviet missile. On November 3rd, 1957, Sputnik 2 was launched. Radio transmitters inside Sputnik 2 sent back valuable data from the first living creature to penetrate outer space. Leica's heartbeat, temperature, and rate of respiration were radioed to Earth and carefully studied. And then, after 1 week, Leica was dead. Her oxygen supply had run out. But the information sent back to Earth from Sputnik 2 was vitally important. It proved conclusively that life could survive in space. This is a Soviet astronaut. Shortly after Leica's flight, the Russian Man in Space program began. The same centrifuge that tested Leica was now adapted for human experiments. Highly qualified men chosen from the ranks of the Soviet Air Force began a life of rigorous training. Russian space efforts also continued in other directions. A series of moon probes called Lunix were launched. And Russia reached a dramatic milestone in space history when Lunik 2 impacted the surface of the moon. Perhaps the most spectacular achievement of Soviet rocketry was Lunik 3. That satellite circled behind the moon and trained cameras on its hidden side. For the first time in history, man was able to look upon the dark side of the moon. These are the actual photographs transmitted back to Earth. Spurred on by the success of their moon probes, the Russians accelerated their astronaut program. This streamlined centrifuge was designed in East Germany and built in Czechoslovakia. Inside this giant machine rides a Russian astronaut. Technicians in a control room above observe his reactions through a television monitor as they gradually increase the speed of the centrifuge. The powerful forces of gravity pull at his body. They are G forces. A single G is the normal force of the Earth's gravity. But now he approaches 7 Gs. His body weighs over 1,000 pounds. How long can his heart continue to pump blood to his brain? How long can he remain conscious? The astronaut is unconscious. He will be revived, and there will be further rides on the centrifuge until his body is able to withstand 16 Gs, the amount he must endure to survive a trip into space. In a laboratory behind the Iron Curtain, another mystery is being explored: isolation. An astronaut is sealed inside a steel cylinder and cut off from all human contact for 14 days. Can he retain his mental balance under these restricting conditions? A battery of instruments will carefully report both his physical and psychological behavior. This is the panic button. By pressing it, he can release himself at any time, but it would mean that he has failed the test. From now on, there is no freedom of movement. He can neither stand up nor lie down. The test begins. There is no routine except an occasional simple task. A light symbol flashes on a screen before him. He responds by pushing a matching button, turning off the light. Now he is experiencing the same loneliness and isolation he would feel if he were orbiting in space, high above the Earth. The 12th day, the astronaut is weakening. His responses are slow and he begins to show signs of mental collapse. This is a crucial moment in the test. The astronaut has won. He has conquered a force within himself, his own uncertainty and fears. This is a blockhouse somewhere in the Soviet Union. On August 19, 1960, two dogs, Strelka and Bielka, are about to be launched into space aboard a giant missile. The goal is to orbit the two dogs and return them to Earth alive. The outcome of this mission will have a decisive effect on the future of Russia's man-in-space program.
4, 3, 2, 1, start!
For 25 hours, Strelka and Bielka circle the globe. From a special television camera aboard, their images are transmitted to scientists below. You are actually witnessing, for the first time, the flight of living creatures in outer space. Strelka and Bielka were returned from orbit and recovered alive. It appeared the way was now open for the Russian astronaut. According to many sources, the first attempts to launch Soviet astronauts met with failure. There has been no official confirmation of these reports. But on April 12, 1961, the Soviet Union climaxed its spectacular space achievements when Major Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin was launched into orbit around the Earth. You are now listening to the voice of Major Gagarin as he reports from his space capsule. The flight is going on successfully. Visibility is good, and I myself am feeling good as well. In 89 minutes, he circled the globe. He returned to the greatest celebration in the history of the Soviet Union. The Wright brothers had taken the first step, and Major Yuri Gagarin had taken the second in man's journey of 1,000,000 miles into space. Dateline, San Francisco. Approaching the Golden Gate Bridge comes 73,000 tons of new muscle for the world's largest fleet of supertankers owned by an oil company. Nearly 3 times the length of a football field, this is the flagship of Tidewater, the Flying A company. It heads a fleet of 22 huge Tidewater tankers. These ocean giants feed select crude oils to Tidewater's $120 million refinery at Avon, California. It's the most advanced refinery in the West, with steel skyscrapers like this one, 25 stories high. Here in this great city of science and steel, Tidewater uses the most advanced refining techniques in the industry to make Flying A the gasoline that burns clean. And to bring you Tidewater's quality products, there are more than 10,000 Flying A stations, with new ones going up all the time. These big, bright, modern stations have brought you one new advance after another from Tidewater Research. The first 100-octane gasoline, The first gasoline that burns clean. The first gasoline with MS3 by DuPont. Flying A stations also feature the world's most famous motor oil, Vidal 1030. Today in 82 countries, Vidal protection means longer engine life. For this is one motor oil you can count on to protect under all conditions, in any climate, anywhere you drive. Every Flying A station is a world of quality products for your car. Drive in at Tidewater's sign of quality, Flying A. The American space program was launched from this blockhouse in Cape Canaveral. The time was January 31st, 1958, 4 months after the orbiting of the first Sputnik.
2, 1, fire command, fire.
Lift off! The launching of Explorer 1, America's first artificial satellite, plunged the United States into the age of space. There have been over 30 successful American satellites and space probes, 3 times the number launched by the Soviets. What America has lacked in rocket power has been offset by the scientific discoveries and priceless information given the world through less spectacular but more practical space vehicles. In the summer of 1958, NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, was created to unify American space research activities. One of NASA's prime concerns was the American Man in Space program, Project Mercury. The start of a great adventure for 7 American men began at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. NASA had decided that the Project Mercury astronauts would be selected from the ranks of a special breed of man, the highly trained military test pilot. Education? A university degree in science or engineering. Experience? 1,500 hours of jet flying time. Age? Younger than 40. The records of 470 candidates were selected for study, but only 32 were selected for final screening. These men were subjected to the most rigorous medical, physical, and psychological examination in history. An evaluation board composed of experts in the fields of aviation medicine, psychology, and biophysics discussed, debated, analyzed every report, every test. The 32 men were so superbly qualified that the board was forced to concentrate on engineering ability as the final criterion for their selection. On April 9, 1959 in Washington, Dr. T. Keith Glennon, head of NASA, announced the final choice.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you, and I consider it a very real honor, gentlemen. From your right, Malcolm S. Carpenter, Leroy G. Cooper, John H. Glenn, Virgil I. Grissom, Walter M. Shearer, Alan B. Shepard, Donald K. Slayton. These ladies and gentlemen are the nation's Mercury astronauts.
These are America's astronauts. What is the mission that lies before them? What is the purpose of Project Mercury? The purpose of Project Mercury is to place an astronaut inside a space capsule atop a giant missile. The missile will be launched from Cape Canaveral and hurled 115 miles into space. The capsule will separate from the missile and orbit the Earth at a speed exceeding 17,000 miles per hour. It will take only 90 minutes to circle the globe. As the capsule passes around the Earth, it will be in constant communication with worldwide tracking stations. In a period of 4.5 hours, after circling 3 times, the capsule containing the astronaut will re-enter the the Earth's atmosphere and be recovered somewhere downrange in the South Atlantic. But before this fantastic flight into space can be achieved, a number of preliminary flight tests will have to be performed. First, a chimpanzee and then an astronaut will have to be launched in a space capsule and sent 200 miles out over the Atlantic and be recovered successfully. Then a chimpanzee will orbit the Earth. And if all goes well, finally, man himself will be ready for his trip to outer space. But to reach space and return safely, the astronaut will have to face tremendous physical and psychological stresses of an intensity that man has never before encountered in the world he knows. All of us have experienced, to a minor degree, some of the same pressures that an astronaut must endure. But imagine the forces of a roller coaster magnified 40 times. On December 10, 1954, an Air Force doctor, Colonel John Stapp, subjected himself to the astonishing force of 46 Gs. 46 times the normal force of Earth's gravity, and he lived. Rocket sleds were pushed to even higher and more dangerous speeds with dummies aboard. On this Navy centrifuge at Johnsville, Pennsylvania, Project Mercury astronaut Alan Shepard battles the forces of gravity.
Report, G.
7.
7.
8.
9.
11.
11.
All right. Run is over.
4.
4.
Each time he rides inside the whirling machine, he practices the procedures of launch and re-entry, building tolerance to the stresses he must encounter during actual spaceflight. The direct opposite of G-forces is weightlessness. As a plane flies into a steep arc, its upward climb counteracts the downward pull of gravity. And so for short periods of time, the Mercury astronauts experience the mysterious sensation of weightlessness, a condition they will encounter while in orbit. The highest step in the world was taken in August of 1960 by Air Force Captain Joseph Kittinger. He was carried aloft by a giant balloon high into the sky above New Mexico. The purpose? To test man's ability to function at the edge of space. As Kittinger looked about him in this cold and eerie world and radioed back his technical and scientific observations, he added this footnote. There is a hostile sky above me. Man may live in space, he said, but he will never conquer it. And then, nearly 20 miles above the surface of the Earth, Joe Kittinger stepped out into space. For 8 long and terrifying minutes, he plummeted toward Earth before opening his parachute. He landed safely after the longest free fall in history, bringing back with him new understanding about the problems of orientation and equilibrium in space. To cope with orientation, a unique machine called M.P.S.E was devised. Strapped inside, astronaut John Glenn begins a wild ride. It simulates the dangerous conditions that might occur if his space capsule were to plunge out of control. While the astronauts are being trained, NASA experts are hard at work on another phase of Project Mercury. The Atlas missile has been selected as the vehicle to propel the astronauts' capsule into space. And now at the Convair Assembly Plant in San Diego, it has to be adapted for its crucial assignment. The astronauts are there to study and confer during this complex modification for the destiny of one of these men and one of these missiles are inevitably linked together. At the McDonnell Aircraft Corporation in St. Louis, another challenging problem is undertaken by a task force of engineers and scientists. The design and construction of a space capsule for which there is no precedent. A capsule large enough to contain a man, yet small enough to fit atop an Atlas. Because the human body can withstand more G-forces in a prone position, the traditional pilot seat has been abandoned. Instead, a supporting couch has been designed and molded to fit each astronaut. Inside the capsule, all flight controls have been centered in one instrument. The astronaut can easily regulate the motion and direction of the capsule during the critical period of re-entry. Through test after test, models are studied and evaluated. Airdrops of the capsule help to perfect an intricate recovery system. As the capsule strikes the water, an automatic device will propel the chute away to prevent entanglement. Now a whole series of fast-moving events will take place to help search planes and ships locate the capsule. A thick cloud of smoke will pour from the capsule. A brilliant dye marker will stain the sea. Miniature depth charges will explode beneath the water, alerting sonar equipment aboard rescue ships. And powerful radio beacons will send out signals over hundreds of miles. If the scheduled rescue by ship or helicopter is delayed, the astronaut is trained to evacuate the capsule and board his own emergency life raft. Every eventuality has been considered, including the chance the astronaut might be trapped underwater. Here, astronaut Virgil Grissom is being trained to free himself from the sinking capsule by means of an escape hatch. His spacesuit has been designed to provide sufficient oxygen for him to reach the surface. There was one more major problem left to consider. Imagine now that an astronaut is lying in his capsule, riding in the nose cone of this Atlas missile. How could the astronaut escape from what seems to be certain disaster? That was the prime concern of NASA engineers, and especially of the astronauts themselves. The Atlas had been modified for maximum safety, but no missile is foolproof. This final problem is solved by an ingenious escape system. 3 small, high-powered rockets are attached to a tower above the capsule. Under emergency conditions, these rockets ignite and swiftly hurl the capsule into the air, far from the exploding missile. The capsule parachute opens, and the astronaut floats down to safety. (1879). Titusville, Pennsylvania. It was here that the world's first long-distance pipeline was laid by Tidewater Oil Company. It stretched 104 miles and was hailed as the marvel of the age. This same year, one of the world's first oil tankers was built, the Falls of Clyde, Tidewater used it on the San Francisco-Honolulu run. From the very start, from the days of horse-drawn tank wagons, Tidewater, the Flying A company, has been making news. Today, this 82-year-old oil company is stepping on the gas. Tidewater's original pipeline has expanded to a 6,000-mile network. That sailing ship has given way to huge supertankers, like this 73,000-ton giant, flagship of the world's largest supertanker fleet owned by an oil company. And Tidewater products now come from the world's most advanced refineries, where the newest processing methods in the industry bring you today's Flying A gasolines and lubricants. You'll also see Tidewater's dynamic new growth in the number of Flying A stations going up from Maine to California. More than 10,000 now, and still more new Flying A stations on the way. Today, everywhere, Tidewater Oil Company is on the move. In research, in exploration, in refining, Tidewater is going places. Today, at every Flying A station, that big A is for action. Your car will enjoy Flying A's finer products, and you'll enjoy the finer service offered by your Flying A dealer. Drive in at Tidewater's sign of quality, Flying A. Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the Atlas launching pad assigned to Project Mercury. You are about to witness the simulated countdown and launching of an American astronaut into orbit around the Earth. You will follow the step-by-step preparation of the capsule, the missile, and the man. The huge Atlas missile is trucked from Patrick Air Force Base and arrives at Cape Canaveral. Its destination, the Project Mercury launching pad. In the weeks to come, an army of technicians will test and evaluate the vast and complex systems of the Atlas. But now the giant missile is slowly and carefully raised into the massive gantry. At the same time, the space capsule arrives from the McDonnell Assembly Plant in St. Louis. Before it is raised atop the Atlas, the capsule, too, must be thoroughly checked out. Placed inside a sterile chamber, its sensitive instrumentation is subjected to an exhaustive inspection. The astronauts are spending their last moments of relaxation with their families and friends. Soon they will go into seclusion under the watchful eyes of NASA experts for briefing and rigorous medical examination. And finally, one of them will be selected for his greatest adventure. The launching time is now only a few days away. The capsule and the missile are ready for mating. Slowly and gently, the capsule is hoisted high up into the gantry. Several miles away from the missile is Building T3, the Project Mercury Control Center. Here are assembled the men and machines which will maintain constant contact with the astronaut before launch and while he is in flight. On a giant map of the world is the capsule's planned orbital path. As it circles the Earth, 16 tracking stations will be in constant communication with the astronaut inside. These stations form a vast global network. The Mercury Control Center will receive all reports from the tracking stations and check their continuous operations. A flight surgeon will study and analyze the astronaut's physiological condition. This space doctor will know better than the astronaut himself how his body is responding to the effects of this new and hostile environment. The reaction of the capsule will be closely monitored by engineering experts. They will advise the astronaut of the capsule's condition during all phases of flight. This is the range safety engineer. At the first sign of danger, both this man and the astronaut have the power to ignite the escape rockets and hurl the capsule to safety. But the overall supervisor of the entire mission is the Mercury flight director. He alone is responsible for the countdown. All final decisions are his. The launching of the missile itself must be carefully coordinated between the many specialists in the Mercury Control Center and the teams of technicians here inside the Atlas blockhouse. Close by the launching pad, these men supervise the complex operations as the Atlas is readied for flight. As the hours pass, each new phase of preparation becomes more crucial and more exacting. It is the night before the launching. The sensitive job of fueling the missile begins. Liquid oxygen is cautiously pumped into the waiting tanks. It is the morning of the launch. In the South Atlantic, the Navy is moving into position. Their mission? The quick and safe recovery of the astronaut and the capsule on their return from orbit. At Cape Canaveral, the weather is clear for launch. The countdown is continuing on schedule. A few miles from the launching pad is the astronaut's preparation area, Hangar S. Inside, his spacesuit is being given its final checkout. This is his most vital piece of equipment. The astronaut has been selected. Now he is ready for flight. Special recording instruments are attached to his skin. He is carefully suited up. Many skilled hands help him. For each fastening must be perfect, each coupling precisely secure. Two and 1/2 hours before firing, he leaves Hangar S. He travels to the launching pad with a crew of technicians inside a special transport van. It moves into position beneath the giant gantry. The tower elevator carries him to the top of the missile. For a moment, all activity stops. The astronaut squeezes himself into the cramped interior of the capsule. He begins an elaborate pre-flight procedure with the engineer inside Mercury Control. Technicians hook up his recording instruments. The astronaut is finally readied inside the capsule. The hatch is sealed. His only link now with the outside world is his radio contact with the men inside Mercury Control. Offshore from Cape Canaveral, helicopters are prepared to recover the astronaut in case he is forced to use his emergency escape system. All is in readiness for the final minutes of the countdown. It is now X minus 100 minutes.
All personnel, not conducting tests. Please clear the test stand area.
Proceed with gantry removal.
Test conducted as a test stand.
Go ahead, test stand.
The boot has been sewed up completely around the booster. The service tower is in the process of being moved to the transfer table.
All right.
Test conducted as a test stand.
Go ahead, Tim.
Service tower has secured the maintenance area. The crew are leaving by way of truck.
All right.
LN2 spray manifold is on. Test stand looks in pretty good shape, Tom.
Pilot, this is range safety. Please check your escape handle. Escape handle inboard and locked. Pilot, you now have manual control of escape tower rockets. Roger, range safety.
Pilot, stand by for aeromech checkout, please.
Pressure indicators all okay. Suit and body temperature normal. Respiration and heart all okay.
Test conductor, this is RSS.
Go ahead, Arthur.
We have satisfactorily completed the range safety command test.
All right.
Test conductor, on further checking, I'm sorry to tell you that system 2 is no-go at this time. Only estimate I could give would be about 30 minutes to try to determine what our problem is.
All right. Stand by.
Test conductor, telemetering.
Go ahead, telemetering.
Telemetering's all go.
Thank you.
Test conductor, support coordinator.
Go ahead, Frank.
You have 100% optics.
Okay, Frank, thanks. Test conductor, this is test stand. Go ahead, Jim. Tom, all checks out okay over here. We're evacuating the test stand area. All right.
35 here, counting.
Pilot, pre-flight instrument check, please. My left battery switches are now on. All switch fuses are on. All retro panel lights are green. Roll yaw and pitch indicators are responding normally. Roger, pilot, thank you. Stand by and clear channels for tracking network reports. Unit Station 2. Station 2 is all clear and go. Atlantic Station 3. Station 3 is all go. Mary Island Station 4.
Station 4, tracking equipment is all ready and condition is go.
Nigeria Station number 5. Station 5 reception is all go. Zanzibar Station 6. Zanzibar Station 6, go. Indian Ocean Station 7. Sorry, Station 7 is no-go at this time. We have radio interference, and we'll report back when clear. Roger. Australia stations? Australia stations are all go. Pacific stations? Pacific stations are all go. Mexico Station number 13. Station 13 condition is go. All continental stations. Station 14 is go. Station 15 is go. Station 16, go. Canaveral is go.
Minus 15 minutes. Mark.
This is 1.
I wish to advise that radio interference reported earlier by the station is now cleared. We have routing communications with all ships and stations, over.
Roger, thank you. Go. Go.
Beacon.
Go.
G guidance and IP. Go. AFMTC telemeter.
Go.
Telemetering quality. Go.
All capsule stations give status report. Aeromet panel is all green. Capsule environment panel.
Capsule environment is green all the way.
Pilot ready light is green. All capsule systems are go.
Removing arming safety pin. Arm switch to arm.
T-minus 60 seconds and counting.
Mark.
Missile helium to internal. Steady.
Minus
Zero
50
seconds.
time.
Range ready, switch on.
50. Starting foam removal.
Missile prep complete on engine test.
Status check. Locks tanking. Pressurization.
Satisfactory.
Water system. Satisfactory. Range operation. All clear. All the pre-joint panel lights are green. The missile prep complete light is green. All recorders to fast.
24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8,
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
there is no turning back. The astronaut is on his journey into orbit. This is the way it will be the day an American is launched into space. Ever look inside a drop of gasoline? We do at Tidewater again and again, splitting the tiniest of drops even smaller, and smaller, and smaller. Then we check the balance of molecules to learn all that science can learn. All to make Flying A the most advanced gasoline of today and for tomorrow. From other Tidewater research programs come new ways to bring your car a longer engine life with lubricants designed to protect under all conditions in any climate. That's why Vidal motor oils are so widely used in 82 countries around the world. And Tidewater research also brings you greater safety with the remarkable new Flying A safety ride tire. First with the revolutionary Dynapol tread. New safety ride tires take extreme punishment with an extra margin of safety. Watch. At 50 miles per hour, these Flying A tires on the left stop 39 feet safer than other premium tires. New gasolines developed in Tidewater laboratories have to prove themselves under the widest range of driving conditions. They're tested for winter driving high in the mountains, tested for summer heat out on the desert, tested for start and stop driving too. Tested and tested to make sure Flying A gasoline puts more action in your car wherever you drive. This research is just part of Tidewater's $1.25 billion investment for your car. And here's where it all pays off for you. In finer products and better service at your Flying A dealer. Drive in at Tidewater's sign of quality, Flying A. Both the United States and Russia have now sent a man into space. What next? For years, science fiction has been the improbable forerunner of reality. But now reality has begun to overtake the world of science fiction. Scientists now have space vehicles on their drawing boards that will carry man to the moon and beyond. Some of us will see these wonders in our own lifetime. For strangely enough, orbital flight around the Earth will one day become as commonplace as today's jet flight across the ocean. And someday there will be new wonders. The exclusive films you are now seeing were produced by the Soviet government and give us a fascinating insight into their timetable for the future exploration of space. A timetable that is similar in many details to the plans of the United States. Giant cargo rockets will send material into orbit for construction of permanent space stations. Crews of astronauts will follow for the job of final assembly. Parts prefabricated on Earth will be easily joined together. The space station will take shape as it races around the world at orbital speeds. The rotating cylinder will create the sensation of gravity for the travelers inside. An observatory will study weather conditions and transmit accurate forecasts back to Earth. Outside the space station, astronomers with powerful telescopes will be able to view the heavens with new vision, free of atmospheric haze. Then the day will come for man's next great adventure in space. A rocket will be assembled on the space station and launched toward the moon. Each step man takes is only another beginning on his journey of 1,000,000 miles. This program presented by Tidewater, the Flying A Company. Tidewater, with the world's most advanced refineries, where men and science and towers of steel bring you better motoring. This is Tidewater, the Flying A Company.